Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. I think this podcast itself will be hopefully a little bit shorter than usual. I've still got to make up for my 2-hour plus long podcast. So, I gotta say a few mea culpas first before I can get back to normal length. Anyway, I did, though, want to comment just a little bit more on my experience recently with putting the so-called game theory I explored to life. And more specifically, I want to address the way some individuals that I just know personally in my life, friends, family even, who said certain things that I would just fundamentally disagree with. And I think spelling out those disagreements and why I disagree and fleshing that out is a much more significant positive effect on an individual's ability to live a fairly decent or happy life versus what a few of my friends and family said. I know I sound kind of cryptic here, but I really just don't want to drop trowel very first in the introduction and say everything and make it a 40-second podcast either. So, don't worry, I will get into that in detail, all these things. Not the dropping trowel part. Don't think about that. I'll edit that out later. I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, but I do want to address what some people said with respect to my experience with applying that game theory to life. And why I disagree with some of their comments. And how, in my view, my disagreement is frankly a very, very positive thing that I really think anyone could embrace and use to help them navigate the troubles that life gives us. So, that's all I wish to talk about today, and without any further ado, we'll just get the party started. So, really quickly, I will provide a 30,000-foot level summary of what occurred in case you're a brand new listener or you otherwise, for whatever reason, don't know what the heck I'm referring to. But essentially, I'm just continuing the discussion with respect to quote-unquote game modeling, which was greatly studied in the 80s, I believe. It's at least one of the first times it was significantly gone through or put through a lot of studies, because it illustrates personality traits that handle difficult circumstances or people, whichever, or both, right? And basically looks at which personality type excels above the rest, in a nutshell. And again, the fundamental discovery was nice guys or gals do actually usually finish first, not last, as we so often hear. And it really came down to a personality that they called tit for tat, which required some very basic pieces to model and to use those to handle a difficult person or a difficult situation that you might be faced with. And it could be easily listed out as number one. You can be nice when you first meet someone and you don't know their intention. You don't know them from Adam. There's no reason to meet someone on the street and, I don't know, sucker punch them in the throat. I don't know. There's no reason to be a jerk. And sadly, I'm sure we all know a few people that are like that. And it's somewhat comforting to know they finished last, because that's what came out of this study. That type of personality, the really abrasive, just aggressive, overly difficult personality type, they don't finish first in the long run. They could get a step ahead briefly through that performance. But if you look at any sort of deferred gratification or deferred success, they fall right to the bottom. So, again, number one, start out friendly. There's no reason to start out being a jerk. Plain and simple. Number two, clearly state your intentions and what you want in your exchange with this person, so that there are no nebulous or uncertain terms as to what you are pursuing in this perhaps difficult situation. It could be purely social. It could be a fight with your partner. It could be an issue you're having with a boss. It could be an automobile accident. It could be a lot of different things. But whatever it is, you're not talking to them, well, I guess you could be. If you're not talking to them just for the kicks of it, you're not just talking about the weather for no reason. This, I guess, doesn't apply at all. But if you have a reason to talk to somebody because you're trying to address an issue or a potential issue, as we all often do throughout our lives, state clearly what your goals are and what you want under no uncertain terms. That's the second step. Third, if the other party, be it an individual, an organization, a group of people, it could be anyone who you're dealing with within this difficult circumstance. If they react negatively or respond in a very negative way at your loss, let's say, it could be emotional even. It doesn't have to be real. I shouldn't say real, because emotional loss is a real loss. But it doesn't have to be a statistic or a numeral of damages or something like that. But whenever this other party does the opposite of what you expect, as you just clearly explained clearly, you must react immediately. You cannot stand back and wait and see if they're just having a bad day. You can't just shrug it off because you don't like confrontation. A lot of people are like that. I'm like that. Innately, I am not a fan of confrontation. It stresses me out, man. But it's something that occurs in our lives. And it always will be there, and you have to know how to handle that. So you have to take that immediate action, no delay, and take it against the opposing party that harmed you, that took that action or decision or whatever it was, that was the antithesis of what you clearly wanted in that second step. So, don't wait on it. You have to react immediately. And then, also as part of that, you have to react very, I want to say harshly, but not harshly. You want to react accordingly. If someone really does something that harms you, that bothers you, your reaction should not be muted or toned down because you're just trying to perhaps exhibit more control. Your reaction needs to be swift and, without a better word, severe. And that's very difficult to do. But I'm just saying that for me, at least personally, I struggle with that. As I just said, I'm not a big fan of confrontation. Surprisingly. But you sometimes have to deal with that, obviously. So, after those first 3 steps, I'll add one more thing with number 3, the last one. Basically, just don't be a pushover. That's really all it's saying. Don't be a pushover. Okay? Defend yourself. Don't stand mute. Defend yourself. But then, number 5, after that, the last step is just as important. Don't hold a grudge. If you communicate to them or somehow make them aware that they harmed you after you clearly stated your intentions, and they then therefore did the opposite of what you wanted very clearly, you don't hold that against them. Take swift and appropriate action against them, but don't hold a grudge. And that's the most, well, I guess the other, I was going to say the most important step. There are no one of these steps really is more important than the others. That doesn't really happen here. But I'm just saying that not holding a grudge is as important as those other important steps. So, if someone harms you somehow, and they knew that it was going to harm you because you clearly stated what your goals were, or what you wanted, you react to that immediately. And if they then adjust their behavior or their decision or whatever it might be you're dealing with to mitigate whatever harm they may have done, it might just be an apology and a personal relationship with a friend. Buy your friend a drink and apologize. Maybe something as simple as that. But you can't hold a grudge against them. You can't go back to this issue weeks later, years later, and complain about it again. or bring it up as still an issue. If it's still an issue, it's your fault for not addressing it immediately when it occurred. And I know, and I've been in a lot of relationships with people that do this. They like to dig up issues from antiquity, it seems, when fighting with you, and you kind of sit there and wonder, where the heck is this coming from? You can tell I've been through a divorce, can't you? Anyway, I dealt a lot with that in a divorce. So do a lot of people in other relationships. But don't be that guy or gal. Don't be one of them. Don't hold a grudge. Once you get to that final fifth step, you have got to return to being friendly and favorable, to give them another chance to perform better than how they performed before, or to not harm you, or to change their decision, whatever it might be. So it's really just those 5 steps. And then basically you just repeat to phase 1, where be nice. Don't hold a grudge, be nice. Once it's done and dealt with, don't dwell on it. If you're dwelling on it, then you are the one who is doing something wrong. Perhaps you are not clear on what you want. And that needs to be cleared up first before you address it with this individual or group. I'm sure many listeners can relate to that. But yeah, it's pretty simple. And that's, again, what these folks called a tit-for-tat personality. And it tended to score higher and above all other personality combinations and scenarios, just ad nauseum. It came out on top repeatedly and consistently. The evidence for it was overwhelming when they did this very intricate analysis way back in the 1980s. So, I shared all of that and how I applied that to a real life situation when dealing with my hospice service provider. It wasn't a good outcome. It wasn't the one that I necessarily wanted. But using that strategy, I anticipated what would happen, and it happened exactly the way I predicted it, by using that formulary, those 5 steps. I knew that this was a relationship with this provider that needed to end. And sadly, that's the best answer sometimes you're going to get. And you will thank yourself for that years later. Now, when I was dealing with all of this garbage with my previous provider, caregiver, I had a lot of friends and family in the sidelines. And I have a very broad array of friendships in my life, of people that I'm close to. You could probably name just about any bizarre personality type you can think of, it, or the opposite of that, then, and I'll be friends with both in my life. That's just how I am. I have a very broad, broad net, for lack of a better phrase, to cast out and pull in folks who I consider friends. So some of my family as well, and some of my friends came to me that they felt it was something they did that made my situation improve at the very end. Because you have to understand, knowing that I could not continue my relationship with my provider, I mean, that's not necessarily good news, but that did enable me to immediately seek a new one. So I did, and by the end of the week I found one. And I'm still with them today. But what bothered me still was the way some people thought the reason why I was able to find an alternative provider and resolve it in a relatively quick turnaround time. And that is what I'm going to challenge here today and provide another explanation that I think is far more liberating to any individual, any of us, when we deal with difficult situations versus what this minority of my friends and family claimed to be the impacting resolution, I guess. I know I'm speaking kind of cryptically, but here's in the next segment, I'll tell you exactly what these few people said, what they think improved my situation at the end of the whole fight and getting a new provider that I liked. And I'll tell you my counter suggestion with respect to how I got from a lousy situation to a fixed situation relatively rapidly. So, I'm going to stop beating around the bush here. Essentially what I heard from only really one family member. And as I look back, I think it was only 2 friends or so. Yeah, it wasn't a big number. Of folks that I've been close to for, gosh, ever. They're, you have your inner circle of friends and family. They're like that to me, so. It wasn't reflective of everyone, but it was a consistent minority that parroted the same thing that caught my attention. And it was the claim that essentially, my situation was resolved because they prayed for it. Yeah. I was told by one of these friends explicitly, I will quote it verbatim. She said to me, I don't care what you say or think, but this is an example of me and others praying for you and things going your way in the end. Right. Let that sink in. I am an open atheist. I'm not militant about it, or, it's not like I'm going crazy on people because they have their beliefs. But that's why this person specifically said, I don't care what you think or what you'll say. In other words, I know you don't think prayer does anything, but I'm telling you it does, and this is proof. That's it. I mean, that was the same argument I heard from other people, and they're totally isolated from one another. So, since it was repeated a couple of times, not many, 2 or 3 maybe, but it was repeated the exact same way between people who don't even know the other person exists. They never talk to each other. So it caught my attention. And I, of course, strongly disagree that praying had anything to do with what happened or what didn't happen. And frankly, whenever I hear someone say they are sending their prayers, to me is the most obnoxious cop-out I've ever heard in my life. And you might as well just say, I'm gonna sit here on my hands and do absolutely nothing and just hope everything works out. Sure, I could throw you a lifeline while you're drowning in a river, but no, I'm gonna pray on it. That's how I interpret that. I know I'm a minority. I know most of the world doesn't think this way like I do. But be that as it may, the alternative that I have, that I think more accurately describes why things worked out the way they did, is far more positive and liberating to individuals facing rough times than saying a simple prayer. And I will tell you what that is. So, what I think truly, what enabled me to pull through this debacle, this crisis, this catastrophic event, as it was, and I'm not exaggerating, I was cut off from all medical care, all medication, counseling, everything at the drop of a hat. It was rather egregious, to be blunt. The thing that I think helped me to turn things around was me helping myself as I have throughout my entire life to build a network of support, of true friends that will be there for me, for help when I need it. Possibly coming from many miles away. Actually, a lot of the time, that is the case. People trying to help me with what little they could do from hundreds of miles away. I think fundamentally, the thing that got me through to a resolution is that support network that I have gone forth and created and saved throughout much of my life. And I really don't want to get into the specifics of it, mainly because it might reveal some people's identities, but I'm rather certain from what I heard when I was taken in by this new provider that it was precisely my network of support that I had built for myself that brought me to a much better conclusion. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a far better, actionable, pragmatic, way to deal with these situations versus, say, just prayer. Because, and I am actually narrowing it down to just prayer, because I really don't care if somebody prayers. But they also do it in concert with building up their support network. For example, a person may have a lot of support from their peers in a religious congregation. And that, I think, absolutely qualifies as an excellent support network. So just by the mere fact that prayer was part of it doesn't negate the fact that they did the right thing of providing for themselves by seeking out and developing a strong support network for when things go south. I have no problem or issue with someone praying along with always looking to develop and have some sort of support channel or group, people close to you that you can call upon when you're in dire straits and ask for help. I couldn't care less if a prayer was tossed in along with that. That's not the issue. I only have the issue where they think that's the only thing that makes the difference. And I hope that's clear when I say that. But I will also provide some evidence that I had heard when going through this crisis and trying to find a new caregiver, that my assistance, my life support thrown to me, which really was what it was. I was in dire straits. And I heard my new provider that I'm with now say some things that I think were clear indicia of that support group that existed long before the negative event. Is what saved my little tush by the end of the week. So, I'll share a little bit of that with you. So, as I was coming to the close of my meeting with the medical director of my new provider. She said some things as she was on her way out the door that made me truly realize what had really saved me in this crisis. She said something along the lines of, that she had heard that I have a vast knowledge bank of completely useless and strange information. Which is true. I mean, except on maybe Jeopardy or something. I don't know. But, yeah, I'm very well read. I'm very well educated. You know, there's not much to it. And I retain things very quickly and easily. For example, when I was in the undergrad lectures in college, if any of you are college alumni, and you're sitting there in that gigantic lecture hall with the prof blabbing away down at front and in the middle, more or less. For the most part, if you took a moment to take stock of what the room around you was doing, you'd see a lot of different reactions, a lot of different ways people handled the lecture. There might be some guy sitting in the back with his arms crossed, just looking obstinate or staring at the ceiling and without a care in the world, not listening to anything. He's there, but you can just tell they're not paying attention. You know, the professor could walk up to them and defecate on their desk and they wouldn't notice. Kind of thing. You saw some people like that, and you also saw some people that are just furiously writing every little word or recording, especially, I guess, nowadays. Why would you write it down when you could record it? But those people that really furiously try to take notes as much as they can throughout the lecture. But when I saw people doing that, they were more into just writing down what the prof was saying. And of course, there's a big variance of individuals, how they collect information. And I was really fascinated by this, actually. I would notice that with a lot of the folks that seem to be, the eggheads, let's say, the ones furiously taking down all the notes, they would very rarely even look up to their professor in really any sort of engagement. They were just merely Xeroxing what was said. That's not interactive with the lecture, if that makes any sense. Of course, then you saw people that were very interactive and paid close attention and could answer questions and all that good stuff. So what I noticed with me is I could sit through, let's say, an hour-long lecture. And what I taught myself to do was to basically take a few notes. Perhaps I might write only 4 words down in the course of the entire hour-long lecture. And throughout that lecture, I would always deeply listen to what the professor was saying. I also learned very on in my life that the best way for me to prepare for an exam is to have no preparation whatsoever. There's always the night crammers, the folks that cram study for day and night or days and nights before a final or something. And I never did that. I found I performed better on the exam with the less preparation work I do immediately prior to that exam. And in one lecture, like I said, I might just have 4 seemingly random words written down, and that's it. And the reason for that is, it's just how my brain works. I can look at that one word, and I could be able to recall verbatim everything relating to what the professor said, or the reading material said, or both. Just from one word or perhaps a small phrase. And that was because I paid deep attention to everything that I read and every lecture I attended. Because for me, I learned that it was much easier for me to just learn the material as it is presented to me and as I go through the course and file it away in my permanent memory bank, then try to suddenly study or cram right before the final exam because I didn't really say learn everything in real time. There could be a lot of people out there that wrote down everything the prof said, but they were so busy writing all that down, they weren't listening, they weren't paying attention. They weren't getting the meaning behind it. And so even though they had just impeccable notes, they absolutely had to study because they stole that opportunity from themselves to just learn as you go. Don't learn the 24 or 48 hours before. That's suicide to me. I don't know why anyone would want to do that. I could not do that. So, my methodology has always been learn as I go and pay deep attention and filed away in my memory bank for long-term memory. And if I did that method down to just a few words per lecture maybe, or reading material, and absolutely no preparation, nil, before the exam, I would get just A's and honors nonstop. I would pass every exam with flying colors. It's just how my brain works. It's easier for me to learn it than to pretend to learn it and then cram it in just before. The only reason why I'm talking about this is because that's why I know it's true when this medical director said I have this large swath of knowledge that is completely useless. Sure, some of it is useful, granted, but that's just a consequence of how I've learned things in my life. I put it into my permanent memory bank as best as I could as I went. So that's my elaborate explanation of how I knew this medical director was correct. And it struck me when she said she heard that about me. And so that sort of made me tilt my head a little bit. I was quite curious who told her that. Because this was a brand new entity. Or the company, anyway. I didn't have any relationship with this provider at any time before in my history. And yet she knew certain things about me walking in. She also said that she knew I had a podcast. And I just flatly asked her, well, who told you that? I was really curious at that point. Her response was merely, I have my sources. And she left. I still have not had that answer. But someone in my group of support and of friends in my life managed to get to this provider before I even had my initial appointment with them. And I have a suspicion of who it was, but I have not confirmed that in any way yet. I mean, I think I'm right when I consider who most likely is the source. And I'm happy enough with that. I don't need to have it confirmed for me to make anything awkward for this other person. If they want to be anonymous, let them. There's no reason for me to challenge it other than just my mere curiosity. But that is a prime example of having a closely knit support group, a sort of inner circle that you talk to and you share with on a regular basis. And so that when the time comes, when there is a crisis, they are there for you. And you may not even know it. To me, that is beautiful. That fills me with so much hope in myself and in my fellow people, in the species, that any individual, if they take the time to build that group, that support group, they'll be there for you before you may even ask. And to me, that is just beautiful and liberating. I'm not dependent upon an omnipotent master of the universe to change their plans because the right incantation was said enough times. I mean, that sounds terrifying to me. It's magic. That's terrifying. No, I don't want that. But the alternative that presented itself here with this situation is something that anyone can do. And you don't need an omnipotent God to even approve of it. Doesn't need to be in the equation. Might be for them. Again, I don't care. But that is not the reliant factor of what will help you in those times of need. And coincidentally, I actually underscored this belief that I just shared when I was talking to somebody who, golly, they're not a friend. I wouldn't put them that way. They're a drama queen. We know the type. All right? Total drama queen. Everything's a crisis. Also, viciously addicted to opiates, thank you. Who, coincidentally, within this same time period, lamented to me, what am I going to do when my parents pass away? Who's going to help me then? And truly, I do believe that would be a terrifying position to be in. Not knowing who would help you then. Because you've burned all the other bridges. Be it as it may, I did answer her and said, You are the one that will have to help you. And she took that as basically a defeatist. Oh, you're right, I'm screwed. No. You can start helping yourself 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. You've got to build that support network of friends and close associates and folks who will help you when you are in need. And you might even find the truest friends are going to help you before you even ask. And they won't even tell you that they helped you. And again, to me, that is something attainable by all of us, and is absolutely a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful component of our common humanity. And it doesn't need gods or magic to work. Well, with that said, my dear listeners, I think it is time again for me to wrap this podcast up. As you can well tell, the recent events in my life have been exhausting. Fighting for my own medical care while being told to my face I'm basically on a sinking ship with no lifeboats around. It's just exhausting. I think that's the only word I can use to explain it. It's been very, very difficult. But through it all, I think I still have learned a few things about myself, about the things in life I value, about who my true friends and enemies are. And it's amazing to me that here at the permanent ending of my mortality, I am still learning more about myself and others as I go through all of these challenges. I know I've said it before, but I'll say this quote once again because it seems very true now more than probably ever before in my lifetime. And that is the owl of Minerva only takes flight at dark. Virgil had written that 2,000 years ago. And if you don't know, Minerva was the Roman goddess of wisdom and strength. And she was often represented in artwork as an owl. That's where we get the whole wise owl thing in our children's books today. If you ever wondered, why did we ever think owls were so wise? It actually comes from even before the Romans, comes from the Greeks. When to them Minerva, I believe, was named Athena and stood for those same principles of wisdom and strength. Incidentally, I've also learned when I was in Austria for quite a bit of time, when I was 16 years old. It's a running joke that in the front of the Austrian Parliament building, there is a statue of Minerva, representing wisdom and strength. But the running joke amongst the Viennese and the Austrians is that's why she has her back turned to Parliament. Because, well, they don't think their parliament's that smart after all. Not unlike how Americans feel about their Congress. It's kind of funny. Anyway. At least in this case, that old saying that Virgil coined in the 1st century AD really rings true to me. And I wanted to, of course, thank all of you for listening in and giving me some voice to share these experiences, these problems, these triumphs and failures. I truly do thank you all for allowing me to give some sort of platform to share these thoughts. Because they honestly teach me more about myself than probably any other singular activity I've ever done in my life. So, again, I truly thank you for that. If you want to support the podcast any further, you can always toss a shekel by going to the podcast's homepage on Spotify and just select support this podcast, or just go to patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface and you can toss a little shekel in my cup there if you so are inclined. But again, you've already truly given me the best gift possible, and that is your time to hear these thoughts. So they don't just merely disappear into that endless abyss when I expire. So, I will hopefully be in touch in the coming week. And for now, I have to say, auf Wiedersehen.